Hey everybody and welcome to the Bear Root Project. I'm your host Dave Kearns, the owner of Kearnsy Consulting and Educational Services. Now, I know what you're thinking. Soils. They don't sound like that much fun, but I'm going to prove you wrong. And if not, well, at least you'll learn something. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, the first question we have to answer is what exactly is soil? People are pretty quick to call any old pile of dirt soil. I think we need some higher standards. Like, soil to me is living organisms, but it's kind of more like a delicious wafer cookie. I see soil like, layers, right? We call these horizons. So think of it like this: grab a shovel, maybe not literally, maybe we'll just think this one through our heads. Look, I have a sweet picture here for you. So grab a shovel. You start digging a hole, and what you're going to see is like some dark, kind of like brown, maybe some black earth. And now that stuff is the organic material. That's the decomposed and the undecomposed material that sits on top of the wafer cookie, right? The soil horizon, the profile, right? Now, you get through that layer, and what you're going to run into next is usually going to be a mixture of like kind of some organic material at first, mixing in with a little bit of, silt, clay, and sand, and some of those minerals. But you're going to run into the subsoil. Now, you have to think is as it rains, all those nutrients are going to wash through that wafer cookie or the soil profile, and it's going to take all those nutrients from the top layer and it's going to leach them into the lower soil. This is what we usually call topsoil, these top two layers. It's the organic matter and the material right below it, the sand, silt, and clay and stuff like that, that we scrape off, bag it, and bring it somewhere else, right? Now, if you keep digging a hole, eventually you're going to find bedrock. That's what keeps us from plumbing it into like the center of the earth. No thanks. So, why is this all important? Well, we have to understand that soil is more than just that top layer. But as gardeners, my experience is most of our problems come from those top couple of layers. They're either lacking or, just lacking in the cycles and organics that we need in it. Decomposition, that's really important. Really speaking, unless you live on one of those like derelict properties, the one where you haven't seen the ground in like 5 years because they never cut the grass, like your soil sucks. Now, I don't want you to get like all offended just yet, but by the end of the day, I hope you do, because deep down inside, I think we all have a little bit to learn from those types of soils. Now, we have to remember that when we're raking things up and we're throwing all that organic material out, we're losing the ability to control how our soils develop over time. You got to remember, things like prairie soils take like 17,000 years to develop. And what do? Well, we'll come in, strip it off, and, throw back 3 inches of topsoil. So we need to look at what we're doing with our soils and how we can benefit them, you know. And by the end of this, I hope that we'll have some ideas to at least improve those soils over time, because, if it takes 17,000 years for nature to do it, what makes us think that we can do any better, any sooner, right? This. Get it? Do you want me to stop at the puns? I mean, if you tell me to, I probably won't. I almost guarantee that. Anyways, I'm getting off course here. Decomposition, very important. First, we need kind of things like beetles and flies and their larvae and maggots. Ugh. We need those things to come in and kind of shred things apart. So we call those shredders. They take big materials, make them smaller materials. Now, as that material contacts the soil, all these living organisms inside that soil are going to start going to work. Things like slime molds, fungi, bacteria, they all start going to work, and they're all working together to break down this kind of organic matter that's sitting on top of the soil. Okay, quick little note here. I changed cameras. That's why things look a little bit different. So, just wanted to say that. I know. So, what do your plants think about all this? Let's look at two different tree species as an example. The first tree species I'm going to talk about is, say, a large tooth poplar. they like to be at the top of a somewhat sandy hill, right? Think less organic material at the top, more mineral soils in the subsoil, within reason. Of course, there has to be nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, those things still need to be in that soil. But when we look at its ability to grow on top of a sandy hill versus, say, a black spruce, well, we can see that they actually require two completely different sites. On the opposite side of that spectrum, we have the black spruce, and it's growing at the bottom of the hill. So think about all that rain, all that erosion, all that top material, the organic material. That stuff's going to be washing down that hill and collecting at the bottom. Here in Saskatchewan and probably Western Canada, I wouldn't know, we call these sloughs, the bottom of a soupy kind of a wetland. Now, the black spruce appreciates that high organic matter. It also appreciates a high water table. We call these types of trees hydrophytes. Now, it works the same with plants as well, but when we break it down, the black spruce requiring the soil types at the bottom of the hill make it ideal for handling wetter, more organic environments. So, what does that mean? Well, if the back of your property is basically underwater and you have enough organic material in there, then maybe a black spruce is better than, say, a white spruce, right? The white spruce being more like that poplar, it kind of grows at the top of the hill. So, when we look at different types of plants, they require different types of soils. This is really important when we're trying to match that, soil in your backyard with the plants that you are actually interested in. We run into a little bit of a paradox. In urban forestry, it's our goal to make plants that shouldn't grow where you want them to grow. Let's make them grow there. How do we do it, right? How do we alter the site? How do we manage the health of the tree? On the other side of that, it's like, well, we could just plant a tree species that would do really well there because it mirrors its, natural site. And that's what me as a consultant, what I try to focus on. I mean, urban forestry is about making stuff grow where it shouldn't. Plant healthcare is about reducing the stresses and trying to make sure that we don't have more stresses than we need to deal with, which means that we're planting the right species in the right place. This can make our job a little harder, and it can tell us why, if we have one plant that's not doing well, what's the soil like? Is it in the proper soil? Because this is the type of stress that the tree, the shrub, or the plant is going to associate with the rest of its life. Hey, is it too wet here? Hey, is it too dry? Is there not enough organic? Is there too much mineral soil? These are all things that we have to balance out. And it makes the process of fixing the soils after construction even more complicated. So think about it like this. We have a piece of land, we want to build a property on it. Well, what do? We come in and we strip off about half, of that kind of mineral topsoil, as well as the organic matter. And what we want to do is we want to preserve this somewhere else so that we can take it and put it back down when the construction's done. The idea being that we don't want to compact that soil in the process of building, but we do. We just take the top portion off. So over time, we build the building, soil compaction happens, and the idea being that we don't ever actually remediate that. We never come in and do aeration after a big construction job. What do? We grab as much of that organic matter as we absolutely have to, usually about 3 to maybe 5 inches of topsoil. We throw that back on top, and we call that a healthy soil. Well, the idea being that we've taken that soil out of its original environment. We've altered the environment that the organisms were used to. We also have a tendency to pile our soil too high. That's a whole new problem. But at the end of the day, we have to remember that certain types of plants associate different types of soil as necessary. So, are you trying to grow your Scots pine in a lowland swamp? Or maybe you're trying to grow your willow in a hard rock. We have to look at these soil types, and that's what your trees really think about all of this. Let's look at some examples. Here's an example of a native prairie soil profile. Here, Grass grows in an environment best suited to it. You can see the organic layer and the topsoil layer are quite thick, and the roots stay primarily in those layers, but they have a really deep reaching root system. Over time, wildfires and browsing by wildlife will halt the process in which prairies slowly turn into shrub and eventually tree-filled spaces. This is an important aspect of grassland evolution. Now, let's look at the soil horizon for a typical yard. You'll notice that the roots are much shallower, just like the organic, decomposing layer, as well as the rich topsoil layer. You can see that when we're trying to grow a lawn, we're dealing with the restriction of oxygen, organic material, and available water at a depth promoting a healthy root system. Soil compaction and sunlight also have a huge part to play in destroying the healthy topsoil layer. Limiting soil compaction is a huge aspect of soil rejuvenation and care. In this scenario, we would be interested in depositing more organics on the top while mitigating soil compaction in the subsoil to allow for oxygenation and leaching of the nutrients. This would be a slow process, and in my experience is rarely completed to plan, as most people lose interest and go back to the spread it and forget it method, using fertilizers. In this example, we're looking at a soil profile for trees and shrubs. You can see in a forest, we have varying root depths, providing the essential soils and nutrients. The tree's roots can grow deep and amongst all other plants in competition. Because there's no soil compaction, a lot of oxygen can be available to the plant. In your urban soils, you can see that the topsoil layer is thin or just not there sometimes. Not really. The soil is compacted, reducing oxygen deep in the soil, and the trees are left to grow in the depleted subsoil. The nutrient cycle is disrupted, and we're left top dressing the soil to try and make plants grow better with fertilizers, like in the last scenario. In this scenario, we would focus on aeration of the soil, as well as creating or engineering a better soil profile above that subsoil. Over time, nutrients could leach back into the deeper soils and provide a better growing environment. Remember, deep roots means drought-hardy plants for you prairie dwellers. Alright, finally, we're looking at a meadow in which grass and trees sometimes grow together. This is the end result of what most garden centers will aim for when they're trying to give you like soil amendment ideas. It's what they're thinking of, kind of a meadow. On the left, you can see a natural meadow profile. The first thing you'll notice is the layers of the profile are less pronounced. They're kind of diffuse. This is because of a slow and barely changing landscape. The nutrient cycle changes slightly as new plants and trees are added to the list. Unless a flood, fire, or animal browsing comes through, the meadow will produce high organic materials on top of the subsoil with regular drainage. As trees grow into grassy areas, they offer new materials to the soil as they die. This allows for variability within soils, creating microsites, little pockets of changing variables. So, contrast this to your typical lawn profile, and the first thing you're going to notice is the depth of the subsoil layer and the organic layer on top of it. When the garden center tells you to dump 3 inches of topsoil on your lawn, they're trying to mimic that thick, natural layer found in meadows. They're trying to pound more organics into the profile. This is most likely to support as much diverse needs as possible. It's what we're trying to accomplish in urban forestry. Grass, trees, shrubs, whatever. Something that we look for in gardens. But they're using topsoil to do it, which is just nutrient-rich subsoils from somewhere else. This could be similar or very different to what you're trying to fix. Maybe it's what you need, maybe it's not. Depends on what the subsoil was. What they don't take into consideration is that organics still need to break down to enrich this subsoil over time. So, in my opinion, it's a band-aid solution at best until your next compost or top-up. Generally speaking, when we try to resod a new property, we're going to throw at least 3 inches of topsoil down, and we expect that to last at least 10, 15, maybe 20 years. Is that what healthy soils really can support? I mean, look at the meadow soil. That's everlasting. Alright, so the next thing we need to talk about is like, what's something that you can actually do to, improve the type of soil or the quality of soil that you're working with? Well, if you've just kind of had this in the back of the room just as some white noise, listen up. This is the important part. The first thing that you can do is actually composting. Now, composting in the short form of it doesn't matter whether it's happening on your soil like it does in nature, right? Decomposing, undecomposed materials, soil organisms, all that, right? Or you can throw that into your compost bin. Now, if you're letting the decomposition take place in your compost bin, you don't have to worry about all that leaf material that makes your property look a little derelict. All right, the second thing that we need to look at is irrigation. I find myself saying this a lot. Water your property. If you live where there's like lots of water and precipitation, don't worry about it. But like where I live, it's pretty dry. And for things to live and for things to decompose, we need water. So, like, just, I don't know, water your property. It's that simple. It helps. Okay, you guys ready to hear number 3? If you don't have them, add them. If you have the organic material, you have the water, you have the adequate oxygen, then maybe you're lacking the organisms. So adding shredders and composters and fungi and bacteria, that stuff, that's all great. You can add them to your garden or to your lawn. I know mycorrhizae fungi is a beneficial fungi that grows around or into a root of a plant and gives it access to other nutrients that the plant otherwise wouldn't have been able to have. That's a great soil inoculation. It's one of the main differences between like trees in a forest and trees in your front yard. I'm not saying they're not there. I'm just saying they might be lacking in the population needed to really break down that material at a rate that you appreciate. Number 4. What kind of soil you got? What kind of plants do you want? Remember, the type of plant that you want to plant might not be the plant that you get to plant because the soil doesn't support that kind of plant. Alright, so you got a pretty good idea of what soil is. It's a delicious wafer cookie. I bet you'll never look at soils the same. So, if you're looking for more information than what I included in the podcast, check out our website. We got lots of articles, videos, stuff like that. If you're looking for more like hands-on kind of learning, we do backyard education in the Saskatoon area. We show up, teach you a course, and before I leave, you know what you need to about your property. Well, I hope you enjoyed the show. I had a lot of fun fussing with the camera and the microphone and all that stuff for you, so I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, thanks for joining the Bare Root Project. I'm your host, Dave Kearns, the owner of Kearnsy Consulting and Educational Services. Have an awesome day.